Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the Seeing Ability podcast, where we're having a conversation about the world of folks with disabilities. And that means sometimes we're going to be talking to adults who grew up as that person with a difference. Sometimes we're going to be talking to parents who are or have raised kids that are on a different path. And sometimes we're going to be talking to a lot of people that support this community. Could be folks in education, nonprofits, healthcare, a lot of different perspectives. And so, first of all, I know you have a lot of choices when it comes to your free time. So, thanks for tuning in to the Seeing Ability podcast. I think you're really going to enjoy hearing my guest, Chris Maher, today. He's got a couple different perspectives. First of all, Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here with you today, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and really a pleasure to be a guest with you today.
Well, let's go ahead and get to know you a little bit. As my listeners know, we have a lot of different people, but we're all just people. So we want to get to know you a little bit with what we call the fast forward. Now, this is brought to us by my friends at Reliable Tech Help. So, again, when you have tech needs, reach out to them. They're 502 797 7399. Number one, what is your favorite food?
So my favorite food, if I could only eat one food at every meal for the rest of my life, it would probably either be pizza or cereal.
Okay, you can't go wrong with either one of those. All right, if we were to look at your playlist, what kind of music do you enjoy?
What kind of music do I enjoy? I would say that right now, when I'm in my car, I'm listening to the 80s channel on Sirius XM a lot, which is like my high school and college days. So I've
Yeah,
been I've been hitting up that channel quite a bit lately.
yeah, we're kind of in the same age bracket, but I think there's a lot of 80s music that holds up well. It could just be me, but
Absolutely.
I think it holds up. I'm right there with you. Okay, number three, there's a judgment-free podcast here. So is there a guilty pleasure TV show you enjoy, or a book you've been reading, or a movie you've seen? What are you consuming in your non-work time in that
So
arena?
a great question. So I've been on a bit of for a couple of years now, I try to find these like limited series shows, and it
Yep,
all started back in COVID with Ted Lasso, which I was a massive fan of.
yep.
Shrinking is another great one, which is on Apple TV Plus. The one that I just finished that I really liked is Mobland on Paramount Plus
Oh
with Tom
yeah,
Hardy and Pierce Brosnan. It's a little violent, so if you're not into that, but it's Guy Ritchie if you like Guy Ritchie stuff. So
yeah.
that's the most recent one that I just finished that I really liked.
Yeah, that looks like, and what a great cast for that one.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
Okay, and then last but certainly not least, a bucket list trip or a favorite
Ah,
destination.
so for me, I've got two bucket list trips that would be for my family. So one is over the course of my career, I've worked for several Australian companies and have spent a lot of time in Australia. And I would love to take my wife and daughters there someday for a trip. But the other thing that I've had in the back of my mind for a very long time is, and I keep telling my wife and daughters this, and I don't know if they're fully on board, but I would love to rent an RV, get the family and the dog in the RV, and take 2 or 3 weeks and drive around the U.S. and hit
Okay,
hit
I
like
love that.
national parks and
Yeah,
and historic spots and fun cities. That's on my bucket list for sure.
I
I don't know
think
if
we
it's
need
going to
to.
happen, but
I think we need to get them on board. I can think there's probably a lot of listeners that are like, I'm totally with them on that. Get the RV, get the dog. Let's do that. We are blessed with a lot of great places to see in the United States for sure.
yeah, that's true.
Well, everybody that comes on the podcast kind of comes at this disability advocacy kind of world from a different angle. So tell us a little bit about kind of the short version of your life story, your backstory as a parent. And then I know we'll talk a little bit later, but you can tease us a little bit about currently your professional world kind of intersecting with this space.
Sure. So from a personal standpoint, my wife and I have two beautiful daughters, both of whom live with disabilities. My oldest daughter, who just graduated from college, was born with a physical disability. The technical term for it is polymicrogyria. It manifests itself as a form of spastic hemiplegia. So her left side has always been and will continue to be significantly weaker than her right, doesn't have great dexterity in her left hand. Her left leg, she wore one of those AFO braces on it from about 6 months old until middle school and had surgery to help with that.
Mm-hmm.
That leg's about an inch shorter than the other one, but adapted really well as a kid and has done great and just graduated from college and is pursuing a career in like emergency medicine, emergency management, which is wonderful. So it's all about helping people. And so that's my oldest daughter. My youngest daughter, who was about to graduate from high school, she was born with significant intellectual and developmental challenges and disabilities.
Hmm.
She will never live fully independently. She'll either be with us, maybe over time, and time will tell if she could get to a supported group setting. But she's got kind of a hodgepodge of intellectual and developmental challenges, but is doing great. Is a super happy kid. Next year, she won't go to a traditional college. She'll go to what they call a life transition program at a local university where we live in Connecticut, which will be we're so excited for her. But that's our normal. Like Jim, we don't know any different. Our daughters are amazing. We wouldn't change a thing. Not gonna lie, there've been some ups and downs along that journey for us.
Sure.
And because of that, I think my wife and I, or I shouldn't say I think I know, because of that, we have always been a little bit more aware and sensitive to other people and families on a similar path. And so yeah, and that over time has led me to the work I do today, which is very much centered around the disability community.
Wow. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So, having two daughters with needs and both obviously born that way, for a lot of families, there's this chapter in your journey of like acceptance. You know, the thing that most
Yeah.
parents are familiar with is that piece of writing called A Trip to Holland, you know, where you get
Yeah.
ready for the trip and then the pilot comes over and the speaker and says, "Welcome to Italy." Not exactly where you thought you were going. For you guys, time one and time two, how big or small of a piece was that getting through the fact that you're going to maybe have a different life than what you imagined for as a parent of girls?
Great question. I think for my oldest daughter, it took a while to figure out what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's there was not only this physical weakness on her left side, she had some stuff going on with her eyesight. Um, and so there was a litany of doctors and therapists and but ultimately cognitively she was typical, as they say. So she's
Yeah.
always a very bright girl, but it was more around physical limitations that she had. And so we knew probably by the time around she was 6 months that she had some physical limitations that were going to
Mm-hmm.
be lifelong. Um, and then with my so that the ultimate impact of that, it took many years to really understand the impact of those physical
Yeah.
disabilities and limitations that she had. Um, my youngest daughter, there is a very specific moment where I had a little bit of a light bulb moment, and that was when I think she was in fifth grade, and we would have she had an IEP, or had an IEP, still has an IEP to this day, and every year we'd get together with all the teachers and the therapists, and I would always ask the same question every year at some point in the meeting where I'd say, "So how is she doing compared to her peers?" And in my mind, I always thought, well, maybe she's got a chance to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And the head of the special ed department at the time, and said it in a very compassionate way, and said, "Chris, that's a great question. Unfortunately, it's not the right question to ask. The right question to ask is how is she doing against her IEP plan? Because she's never going to catch up to her peers." And so it was a little bit of a kind of a gut punch to me, but it it really helped to kind of reset or set the appropriate expectations for me as it related to the expectations for my daughter. And so that was a very specific moment in time when there was a bit of a light bulb or aha moment for me.
Yeah. You mentioned different interactions with doctors and healthcare. Did you guys have a process to figure that out? I know for some people it's like being afraid to ask questions, being afraid to get a second opinion, kind of almost finding their, you might call it your footing or your voice in that arena. How was that part of the journey for you and your wife?
So we were very fortunate that my wife chose not to go back to work even before we knew about all the health related issues with my first daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Originally was thinking she was going to go back to work, and then and fortunately we were in a position where on my income we could afford to do that.
Yeah.
And honestly, thank God, because my wife took on the brunt of that responsibility
Mm.
in navigating for both of our daughters, just understanding what was going on And then once we identified what was going on, then okay, how do we now help to support them and help them to grow and develop and move forward? And so I got to be honest, my wife took on most of that responsibility, and so we were very, very
Yeah.
fortunate in that respect. But it was really hard. And what we learned pretty quickly from our own experience, but also from we were very fortunate in having some friends that also had children with disabilities, that
Hmm.
had been a little that were a little bit further along than us, is you have to be your child's biggest advocate, your biggest and best advocate. And not that there aren't a lot of
Yeah.
people that are trying to help, but if you're sitting back waiting for people to come to you and to proactively help you and hold your hand, it's probably not going to happen. You need to engage aggressively and be your child's biggest and best advocate. We learned that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love that. I want to go back to what you were talking about setting the right expectations, against her plan versus against peers. A lot of parents struggle with, like, on one end of the extreme, you got that helicopter parent, that never wants their kid to have a fall. On the other end of the extreme, you've got the parent that's sort of like literally and figuratively jump in the deep end, you'll figure it out. Life is all
Yeah.
about learning through experience. How has that been for you and or your wife, as far as wanting to step in and help out, or wanting to hold back and be like, no, let's let them figure out things even if they struggle? And I know it's different for each of your daughters, but how has that part of it been for you
Yeah,
guys?
it's a great question. And it was a very different experience for both of our children because one has a physical disability, one has intellectual and developmental
Right.
disabilities. And so for my oldest daughter, um, something as basic as putting her socks and shoes on was very hard for her for many years. I mean, I think her younger sister learned how to tie her shoes. I shouldn't say learned how to, was able to tie her shoes before she could because of that weakness in her left hand.
Right.
What was and I'm so proud of her, but from a very young age, my oldest daughter, boy, was she a stubborn little kid. Like she didn't want help and she'd get angry if I tried to jump in and help her. And there were some really hard moments watching her be so frustrated trying to do things on her own. And with her left leg, she had a little bit of a drop foot, that be when she didn't have her AFO brace on, like she'd catch her toe I mean, the poor girl had bumps and bruises and scrapes on her knees and elbows, her entire childhood. But
Yeah.
but um but she's one of the most resilient and toughest people I know, to this day. So that was one experience. For my youngest daughter, I I think me personally probably was easier on her and did too much for her at times. And then there'd be
Hmm.
moments where she would do something and be like, oh my gosh, I am not giving her enough credit for being as capable
Ah,
as she is. And especially as she started to use technology. So my daughter, she couldn't tell you what five times, she's 19 years old. She couldn't tell you what 5 times 5 is, and she could not write a great, clear, legible, complete sentence in her handwriting. But she can go on an iPhone and go into my wife's Amazon account and order and order up a bunch of stuff for herself and send it to our address. Like it's really remarkable, how technology it is going to allow her to have a more autonomous and independent, life, I believe, moving forward, and allow her to uh, be a more integrated part of, I think, kind of, our community because of those
yeah.
assistive technologies and just the way technology is going today. Sorry, I hope that made sense, but that's,
Absolutely. Yeah. Technology really is a bridge for a lot of those kids. I
yeah.
think that's true. So, looking back at this dynamic of, like you said, sometimes it was hard watching your older daughter struggle, but you knew, and luckily she was the one saying, no, no, don't help me. I want to do it myself. What advice would you have for other parents as they're sitting back there? They know their kids need to develop, but they also kind of want to step in, especially if they're struggling. They struggle in so many areas of life. I'm just going to help them and kind of do it for them. What would your advice be? And maybe also, since I tend to have a lot of moms on the podcast, I don't always have dads, and we're a little different in our perspective. So, what would your advice be for parents and especially for dads in this realm?
Yeah, it's really a really important question that you ask. I think that from the parental standpoint, you got to be a team. And what I mean that is at times you have to have the united front and send the same message, but at other times you have to be there to give the other one a break because it can be,
Mm,
as you know, it can be physically and emotionally and mentally exhausting.
yeah,
Raising children with disabilities, um, and I think the I think the natural instinct for parents that are raising children with disabilities is like, I can't take a break. I've got to be here. I've got to do this all for my child. And you start to sacrifice yourself. And so
mm,
when parents can be a partnership and give each other, like, there were days I would come home from work and my wife had been with my daughters. This is when they were very young, the whole day, had not
right.
had time to shower. And I would walk through that door and I could tell right away, like, she's like, she needs a break. And I'd walk in like, okay, I'm here. You go do your thing. I don't need to see you for an hour or two. And I would just jump in and I was dad, right? And but I think that teamwork and the ability to support each other and to really get a sense of when your partner is having a hard time and knowing when to step and say, you know what, you take a break and let me jump in here. And that might be just for an hour, or it might be like, hey, go away with your girlfriends for the weekend. Like, you need a separation from this. So that's from a parental standpoint. I think with how hard or you push and or support your child, oh boy, it's just, I don't think you're ever going to nail it, but it's through that lived experience of trying to figure out what that balance is between the support and the kind of pushing them. And it's really hard. What we've benefited is, we have some friends, some families who also have children with disabilities, and their kids are a little bit older than our kids.
Right.
And so we've been able to learn from them. We By watching them, by talking to them, that has been incredibly helpful for us, especially as our youngest daughter, especially because she will never live independently, where our oldest daughter will. This whole idea of life stages starts to become pretty important, and at those different milestones, things start to change, and there's no playbook for it. You and I have talked about this before.
For
So I
sure.
think so I think the more you can find that community or that small group of other parents, who have a similar lived experience, that lived experience is so important. Um, I think finding that community, as early in the process as you can, I think can be super helpful.
Yeah. How did you guys go about that early on? Where did you find that
It
village?
was it was organic. It was organic. And like what we slowly kind of, through our school system is, when you're going to the special ed meetings and the this and the that, and then we got our youngest daughter in particular, involved in some programs like Challenger Little League, and other programs. We kind of organically started to meet some parents, and then kids that she was friends with, and then you end up hanging out with the parents of the children, or the parents of the children that your children are friends with. So
Sure.
it was organic. In hindsight, I think my wife would even say this, that it would have been beneficial to seek out those parents and that to create that community and support system, a little bit sooner. But yeah, for us it just kind of happened organically. And now we have a very close knit group of probably 5 or 6 families where all of our kids are on the same age, and we're navigating some pretty big milestones in life stages now. Our kids all turned 18 in the last couple of years, and there's some
Hmm.
very important legal decisions you have to make. And within the next couple of years, all of our kids will finish their academic, career. So college for most children with IDD is hopefully something like a life transition program. And so you age out of that where we live by 22. And
Hmm.
so she has now got her next stage of academics, which is this life transition program, which she'll start in the fall, and she'll do that for 3 years. But we're now already starting to think about, and it's because we've got friends who are a couple of years ahead of us. We're now thinking about, okay, when she graduates from her life transition program, we need to be thinking about employment and housing. And is she going to be with us, or could she get to a group setting? And what type of jobs would she be capable of, et cetera? So yeah, let me stop there. Sorry, I jumped around a little bit,
No,
Jim. I
that's wonderful.
apologize.
So with your youngest being, I think you said 19,
That's
just
correct.
graduating from high school, you now have the benefit of being able to look back. When she was first born, the path ahead, it was uncertain. What have being able to look back, what observations do you have about that, and translating that into advice for parents?
Good question. In looking back, it would have been helpful. Recently, that whole big milestone of turning 18, where they go from being a minor to an adult.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff you have to navigate there legally, and some pretty important decisions you have to make. Like, do you want to be guardian? Do you want to only be power of attorney? Big difference between those things, which we don't have to get into now. And there's no playbook for that. And so you're kind of on your own. Like our school, and we're in a lovely community that has a very strong special ed services and support system, but like that's not part of it, right? Like that's
Right.
something you're on your own, and you need to find lawyers and you need to file documents, and like it's it's not easy, and it can be very, very confusing and very complex.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been helpful. What we're going through now, which now that she is an adult, but she is been classified as being disabled by the state of Connecticut, she now qualifies for things like SSI and SSDI. Do you want, and then there's checking accounts and able accounts and all these things that are really important to understand how they work and how they're connected, because you can lose out on services if you've got, $1 more in one account versus another account. And there's no playbook on that. At the
Mm-hmm.
younger age, the youngest age, I remember the first really big decision that we had to make was when she was, I think, in fifth grade. And she had some pretty significant issues around kind of ADHD and attention span, and it was causing some behavioral problems and some challenges at school, and we had a big decision to make on whether to put her on medication or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we really struggled with it for a long time, and we're like, God, are we really going to have our daughter on medication the rest of her life? And but we went and spoke to some families that we know and or knew at the time, and who had already gone through that decision, and it was a game changer for their child, and for their
Yeah.
family. And so we did make the decision to put her on medication, and it did have a pretty powerful impact for her, and I think for everyone around her. But yeah, so those are just a couple of examples. But there isn't a playbook. Like Jim, that's a book you should write if you could. Like it would be amazing, because a lot of families are doing this on their own, and it's really hard to navigate.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. A lot of people, as I was writing the first book, Seeing Ability, which is kind of birth to 18. Obviously, it's a whole different ballpark when you get 18 and above.
Yeah.
Definitely in the back of my good project for book number two. Um, thank you. I think the big takeaways for me are twofold. That when with that answer, one is you can't replace the community. Getting with others that have been in that path. Nobody kind of gets it like them, and especially the idea of ones that have kids that are a few years ahead. So
Yeah.
they've kind of been there. They've learned the hard way. Maybe even mistakes. They would do things differently. You can't replace that. I think that's really important. That's an important takeaway
Yeah.
from that.
Agreed.
Yeah, I love it. And then the other idea is being able to almost look at a timeline and look at like there's going to be stages, when you get into school, when you're in lower school, middle school, high school, adulthood, each one of those transitions comes with a whole set of things, and almost being able to prepare for what's going to happen in this life stage of the journey. I think I hear that being a big takeaway.
100%.
Fantastic. Well, I want to save time because most parents that I talk to, their day job isn't related to this. And so tell us the evolution of like what you've done for a living for many years and what you're doing now, how you've taken those skills but applied it to this world of disability advocacy, awareness, accessibility.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So yeah, I spent up until about a year and a half ago, had spent the 25 previous years as an entrepreneur. I was working in and/or leading a variety of small to mid-sized venture capital-backed companies. So I was very much in that startup world of digital media and internet tech. Um, while in parallel, my wife and I were raising two daughters with disabilities, and I've always loved that early stage of entrepreneurship when you're building a team and building a business. Um, but I'm 58 now, and in my early 50s, I started to get that tug for wanting more meaning in my work, and I think that's some people get to it earlier. It came to me a little bit later, but I think that's kind of natural when you get to that age. And all those companies that I worked in over the last 25 years, the only real mission was a financial one, which was fine. But I started to think about, could I bring together two things that I'm really passionate about? One of which is early stage entrepreneurship, and the other is helping people. And so about a year and a half ago, I started a small venture capital fund, an investment fund, and our focus is the disability sector. So we invest in early stage companies, startups that are focused on either providing products and services to people in the disability community and or creating employment opportunities. And so we're still building the firm, but we've made our first, half a dozen investments or so, and it's broadly disability. We're not focusing on any one area, and that's intentional. And I will say that I have not enjoyed my work this much in a very long time.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love the passion. So give
Thank
us some
you.
examples of like things that you've seen, really innovative things out there that you've had the pleasure of learning about that are going on that maybe our listeners might not even be aware of.
Yeah. So I'll mention a few companies. Um, One company that we've invested in is called Be My Eyes, and it's an app for the blind, low vision community. And so it's
Mm,
leveraging technology, human assistance, and kindness plus AI. And so this app is if you're a blind person and you're trying to navigate your home and find your blue sweater or read the label on your medicine or the box of food, you can open up the Be My Eyes app and it will launch a one-way video call. And one of 9 million volunteers globally will pop into your phone and say, "Hey, Jim, how can I help you?" And they will help you navigate or interpret the environment you're in and say, "Oh, Jim, your blue sweater, it's the second one on the middle shelf."
wow.
But they also have an AI version of that where if you're not comfortable bringing a live person into your home or whatever environment you're in, you can just click the Be My AI button on their app, and their AI will interpret what the camera on your phone's looking at with incredible accuracy. So
Whoa.
that's going to be that when you think of the blind, low vision community, it is giving them autonomy, more autonomy and independence, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
There's an accessible travel company that we've invested in called Wheel the World, as in like wheelchair.
Hmm.
They have a travel booking site like Expedia or Priceline, but all the inventory, the hotel rooms and resorts, and package experiences, trip experiences on their site have all been verified for accessibility, and they guarantee those bookings. What I've learned is that people with disabilities in booking, especially hotel accommodations, many times it's very labor intensive and very time consuming to book that, um,
Hmm.
you know, um, reservation. And then the majority of the time when you get there, they actually don't have an accessible room for you, or the hotel itself is not even accessible with curb cuts and ramps, et cetera. And so they're really focused on the hospitality and travel industry and trying to make a more inclusive and accessible world for everybody to travel. Because,
Right.
and then one other company that I'll mention that we haven't invested in yet, but we're looking at, speaks to the challenge or problem that I talked about earlier, which is for adults with disabilities, specifically intellectual and developmental disabilities, navigating and managing all of those things around your SSI, your SSDI, your ABLE accounts, your checking accounts. If your family has set up a special needs trust, because it's super complicated. And again, the movement
Hmm.
of information and funds across all those accounts, if you don't get it right, you can lose services. And so there's a company that I'm looking at right now that is building that sort of financial services platform for families with adults with disabilities. So yeah, there's some the innovation that's happening around uh, disability and assistive tech and products and services. There's some really cool stuff going on around wearables as well.
Hmm.
That's really exciting in this area of the market. And what's so exciting is that there are entrepreneurs out there that want to do it in a for-profit way. A lot of times when you hear about organizations that are supporting the disability community, most people think like, oh, is it a nonprofit?
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, nonprofits are doing wonderful things for the community, but we need more companies that are driving social good and impact at scale that are supported by a sustainable financial and commercial model,
Yeah.
so they can stand on their own. And so I think it's a really exciting time. And yeah, maybe I can come back another time and talk about some of the exits for some of these businesses that we're
Yeah,
seeing.
I love that. I'm sure I just get excited hearing about all these different things, and it's great to know, like you said, so many people focused on serving a market and a need. But I think it is really cool that they're doing it in a profit way, not sort
Yeah,
of like I said, I spent 23 years of my life in charitable world and
right.
nonprofit world and work with many of them, and they have amazing missions. But it's kind of nice of people to say, no, this is a market. These are needs. There's a profit here. This is a good or a service, and I love that. So that's really exciting. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. I
Oh,
want
my
to ask you
pleasure.
one overarching question that I kind of typically wrap up episodes with. I feel like we could talk for hours, but I do know my audience is kind of busy. But first, I want to take a quick break. When you have a kid who is different, all your ducks need to be in a row, especially your money. Cam Howell with Primerica knows the joys and challenges as he and his wife raise their medically fragile son, Brooks. Cam brings over 14 years of experience to help his clients be protected, have a plan for the future, reduce debt, and connect to resources. Get your financial house in order so that you can enjoy every moment with your child. Reach out today at 502 803 5075. And now back to the show. So, Chris, I like to ask my guests if we were going to bring you in, maybe a local children's hospital is having a group of parents come in and they've got kids that are at the beginning of the journey. Maybe kids are under 5 years old with a variety of different diagnoses. And this is a large oversimplification, but we got you up to the podium and you wanted to share 3 to 5 like overarching keys to success. The advice that you wish somebody had given you years ago. What would that be for parents?
3 to 5 key success. I think we've talked about a couple of them already. I think as parents, you got to stick together and you're a team. Um, and that's a combination of kind of like united front, but also divide and conquer and
Mm-hmm.
support each other.
Yeah.
Um, I absolutely, you need to, as soon as possible, become your child's biggest and best advocate. I think that's really important. I think find your community. I think is another really important one. Um, I think for me, a lot of times when I meet people for the first time and they ask me about my family and they ask me about my children, and if the topic comes up that, I've got a daughter with say IDD, a lot of times their reaction is kind of a sign like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Right.
And I always say, I'm like, "Don't be sorry. She's amazing. She is a gift. Yeah, it's been an up and down road, but like I would not change it for anything because what she has brought to our family and the perspective she's given us, but just the joy. She's like a bright light when she meets people, and the joy she brings to other people's lives. And I think as parents, you have you need to remember. It's hard to sometimes remind yourself of that and remember that when you're having those tough days. But I look at my both my daughters as they are just a gift, and I wouldn't change a thing. I coach a challenger little league team on Saturday morning, so it's everyone knows Little League. Well, there's a subdivision which a lot of people don't know about, which is Challenger Little League, and it's basically
Yeah.
Little League for kids with disabilities, and it is my favorite day of the week. And it's Saturday mornings for a few hours, and we've got, I don't know, 40 plus kids with a variety of disabilities, intellectual and physical, and a combination of those things. And we pair them up with the high school kids, and that's the magic of the program. Those relationships are just incredible, and you're not going to find a place on earth that on Saturday mornings where there are more smiles and hugs going around. And so, I guess that kind of speaks back to finding your community and getting your children engaged in as many activities that give them, pleasure and joy. Because when you see your child experiencing that, then you're experiencing it yourself as well. So that is that four. I think
I
those
think
would
that's
be
4 or 5. That's pretty good. And I
okay.
feel like if I was in that audience, I would walk away with those 4 or 5 with not only some real practical good advice, but a lot of hope and inspiration and
Yeah.
just a feeling of peace of like, I'm on the path I was meant to be on and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I agree.
That's fantastic. Well, I appreciate you being here and being a guest. Thanks for being here. Thank you guys for listening. We're still a bit of a best kept secret, so we can use your help. Go to our Facebook page and like the page, follow the page, and take today's episode and share it with somebody who could benefit. There's probably somebody that needs to hear those tips that Chris just gave, especially if they're right in the thick of the challenges and they're looking at the downsides, the obstacles, and they're not looking at the bigger picture of the journey. This might be just the episode they need. Luckily, I've heard from a lot of listeners that they hear a particular speaker come, a guest that we have on, and it's just what they needed to kind of keep them going on the journey. So please share with us. You might have folks that have great stories like Chris, and we want to meet them. If you have ideas for future guests, right now I'm doing 2 episodes a month. One is an individual like Chris that's traveling this path, and the other is a nonprofit doing work in this space anywhere in the US. So if you can connect me to those groups, we don't want to be a best kept secret. When I started this podcast, we really had 3 goals. One is education, and I know you learned stuff today. Two, no matter how positive you are, we all need that burst of motivation and inspiration. Every time you listen to an episode, I hope you get that. And then three, we talked about finding your village, finding your community, and I want this podcast to become part of your village. That you listen because the people here, they get it, they know what you're going through, and so there's a lot of people that I think could benefit from that. We could use your help getting the word out there. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jim. It's been my pleasure. Good to speak with you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.